All right, let's look at some theory behind the eyes. Again, this is one of these, you don't have to remember all the terminology here. If you were looking at the terminology, though, it's not crazy hard. It might look a bit intimidating when you're just seeing a list of like 10 things, but you probably know most of this already. The reason we are looking at this here is you just have to know these parts and separate them into your mind. It's so easy when you're doing the eye that you just kind of sculpt this potato shape with an eyeball inside of it, and you just got to be able to separate a bit more out in your mind. Whenever I'm sculpting this, I always just think about these various parts. And after I methodically started doing that, my sculpting skills increased so much. So the first thing you're going to see is that we have bone wrapping around the entire eye. This might be the biggest beginner mistake I see, is that people don't consider the skeleton. We talk about this in basically every one of our videos, that remember the skeleton. And even if you're doing an eye in isolation like this, you're going to see this in the next chapter as well, where we sculpt the eye, that we always block out the bone. If you don't do that, there is no way to really know where you're supposed to put the eyeball or how anything works here.
Yeah, that's really, we've tried to emphasize this also just in all videos we've ever done on YouTube, basically, that you always go from the inside out, especially when you're sculpting anatomy, because that way you can place all the bony landmarks and the brow and, underneath the eye socket where it lives. It's the most crucial landmark to get right in order to set the eye right in the face.
Yeah, it really is. And then we have the eyelids. So you have an upper lid and you have a lower lid. Notice how thick they are. The thickness can vary a bit from person to person, like basically everything. But just notice here how much thickness there is. People tend to sculpt this as like 1 millimeter thick or just like paper thin.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of thickness here, which means if you're rendering this, you can see that, this is a clear plane change. Clear plane change here and clear plane change here. And it also goes all the way around it. When I'm sculpting, I like to think of it as actually wrapping all the way around it. And you have this nice little hook shape.
It's like a little sausage.
Yeah.
And a good note is that the eyelid tends to stay the same thickness all the way.
Yeah.
Sort of across the eye. It might taper off a little bit on the ends, but most of the time it's the same thickness all the way around.
And then we have a little guy, which a lot of people tend to not really know about. This is called the epicanthal fold. And if you remember the name or whatever, it's not that important. It's important if you're doing plastic surgery, because this is one of these which in a lot of Asian countries, if you're ethnically Chinese or from that region, you might not have this fold. So if you are doing different races, you wouldn't necessarily see this, or you would see it stronger in some people. So if you're at a plastic surgery clinic in South Korea, you'd probably be specializing in making an epicanthal fold. Yeah. Because that's the new craze over there.
It's an interesting specialty.
Yeah, it is. And then we have the muscle going around it. So we have the muscle here, orbicularis oculi. This is not a true representation of what it actually looks like, but we don't really care because we're not doing the underlying anatomy so much as what's useful to you.
Yeah.
So this muscle wraps all the way around here and helps you close the eye. It's one of these which is like a sphincter muscle, which can just close like your mouth.
And it's also if you try to look in the mirror, right there in the corner where the orbicularis meets the lower lid. So when you try to close your eyes, this whole thing sort of drags up. This will pinch up. And that's the orbicularis trying to contract. Because it's a round muscle, it just sort of contracts up there. So that's sort of the function of it.
It's really interesting if you look in the mirror as well and you just close your eyes, violently close your eyes, and you can just see how much is actually happening there. Yeah. And that's just because the muscle is contracting. So one of the reasons we're mentioning here is because this muscle here will start to sag a bit as you get older, and you have fat on top of it as well. So you have fat here, which is on top of the muscle, and you have fat here as well. These two are important because the older you get, the more these will start to sag.
Yeah.
There is so much individual variation between people when it comes to this line. Some people have this line going all the way over. So instead of it just being a bit of overlap like it is here, it's hanging properly over it.
Yeah.
And the same with this as well. Some people have, the younger you are, the less indication you have. And the older you are, the more gravity is going to affect this pad around it. I found that one of the top mistakes people do when they're sculpting the eye is if you're looking at an old person and you're seeing this shape around it, you're not thinking that it's wrapping over the eyelid, you're thinking that it replaces the eyelid, but you still have the eyelid underneath. So even if this here were to, you're 200 years old and it were to hang all the way down here, you would still have the eyelid underneath. And then we have the caruncula. This is just the tear duct. This is super important as well.
Yeah, this is like the best way to set the eye in the eye socket, basically. Like a lot of people, they will try to adjust their eyelids to make it fit like a spherical eyeball, but not realizing that they're missing the caruncula. So if you don't put in the caruncula, then your eye is just going to look off. As soon as you put in that just tiny little bit there to round it off, all of a sudden your eye is going to look a lot more grounded. Exactly.
You can even extend it a bit more up here as well, and just look at some reference, look at yourself as well. This will be very translucent and have a lot of reflectivity if you're shading it. One thing we didn't include here, because it's technically not a part of the eye, but is you have like a wet line going all around here. This is just some moisture, which you would have around the eye, like so.
Yeah, this was all the rage like 3 or 4 years ago in gaming, when they sort of all discovered it. And they're like, oh my god, everyone needs to look like they're crying now.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah, they look like they're all on the verge of tears.
Yeah.
So that one is super important as well. That's the way you model that is basically just like a sheath of polygons, like a box or something, and then you would just make it transparent. It's not a part of the anatomy, but just keep that in mind. Then we have the eyeball as well, and here we have the sclera. This is the white part of the eye. The reason we're mentioning this and not just calling it the eye white is that
the eye white.
the different animals have different sclera. When it comes to like monkeys, they it's completely brown.
Yeah, but like I've seen on chimps, it's almost black sometimes.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
And I actually have a fun fact around that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast about this the other day about why animals have a brown sclera, black sclera, and why humans have. Because in humans, we work in teams, so it's really important for us to know what other people are looking at. Yeah. And if it's all brown, you can't see it, because then you can't see what you're looking at.
Okay.
So for us, it's actually really important to see if you're looking at me or if you're looking at a stone or whatever, because we're working in teams. But if you're a chimp, you don't want people to look where you're looking, because then you're an individual. You kind of want to hide it. By it being darker, I have like a little ninja trick for you. Just a fun little fact.
That's a good fact.
Yeah, I think is mostly true. The guy in the podcast said it's true. Regardless, you can use that in character designs.
Yeah, definitely.
Where if you want people to have really clear eyes, you can make it white or dark. Then we have the iris. That's where you have all the color. And obviously the sculpting here is terrible. But we just done some light indication. But if you were to look at maybe scans of an iris, or if you look at an artist representation of it, there are a crazy amount of valleys and peaks in it.
Yeah.
And that's really important to get the correct shading in it.
A fun fact about that, so the orbicularis oculi is one sphincter muscle, and then we have obviously in your butt another sphincter muscle, and then you have the iris, which is also a sphincter muscle. That's how it contracts. So if you look at yourself in the mirror and you shine a light through, you'll see your iris start to contract, because it's like a sphincter muscle as well.
And I think that's also important to know that the how big the pupil is dependent on. It's not the pupil which is going up, and the pupil is basically just like a hole. It's a hole in the head.
The pupil isn't really anything.
No, exactly. It's a lack of something.
Yeah.
So the size of the pupil is directly tied to the size of the iris, which is tied to the amount of light there is, or how much drugs you're on.
Yeah, exactly. There is actually some crazy amount of variation in irises. I have a friend of mine. She is not on drugs, and her iris is just huge. Like it's twice the size of like an average iris, which is interesting. So there can be a lot of variation in that as well.
And then if you want to make something look more adorable, or on drugs, you make it bigger. Or if you want to make it look more evil, you just make it smaller.
That's like classic, if you ever watched any anime, it's always like the evil guys always have like super tiny pupils, and obviously like the girls are always like massive. So that's...
Yeah, exactly. So this is one of these subtle little things. If you're looking at somebody in a Disney movie, they look more evil, and you're like, why is it evil? Well, everything is pointy, but take away that, it would probably be the size of the iris, or rather the size of the pupil there as well. So that basically covers the eye. Really important to at least have an entry for all this in your head. If you know well, the names isn't that complicated. If you know the upper lid and lower lid,
Then you're mostly good.
you're mostly good. But just keep this in mind when you're sculpting it.
Yeah.
And regardless of what it is you're sculpting, this is all going to be basically the same, just difference in proportion. You all have the same elements of them. So we'll move on to the next chapter. See you then.